Do you know that between 4 and 7,000 churches close every year in this country? And about 12 to 1,500 ministers leave the ministry every month, and about that many Christians leave the church every day? What's happening? Something's going down. The ship is sinking. Let's find out why. Let's do an autopsy. Stay tuned, and we're going to talk about what's causing the death of the church. Hello, I'm Carlton Pearson, and welcome to Expanding Consciousness. And I want to continue talking a little bit about the dangers of religious fundamentalism. And I can do that because for the first 50 years of my life, I was steeply ensconced in the classical Pentecostal fundamentalist movement. 4 generations. Attended the Oral Roberts University, majored in biblical literature, English Bible, minored in theology, historical studies, became the first or the second to the only 2 associate evangelists that Oral Roberts had in his over 50 years of ministry. Served on the Board of Regents for 15 years. Preached on TBN, CBN, PTL, all the networks, the Christian networks that were popular in those days. Traveled all over the world and preached the gospel to thousands of people, millions by television and radio. Recorded albums, stellar award-winning gospel albums, wrote I think about 15 books before I expanded my consciousness about 10 years ago, and I've written others since then. So I know what I'm talking about when I talk about the dangers of religious fundamentalism, whether it is Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or some other religion. And I speak of those 3 because they are the Abrahamic faith and they're all interconnected. This is the 21st century, and I'm trying to find relevance in ministry. And the only relevance I can find is helping people find their way out of structured religion, institutional religion, or organized religion in any way they can find their way out if they want to get out. And some actually want to get out and they don't know it, or they're afraid to, as I was for many years. I was very sincere in what I preached, denouncing millions to hell that never made sense to me, and that's what I believed, but in my soul, I knew that any God of love couldn't be that vicious, that obscene, and that vulgar to torture billions of people infinitely in what we call eternal damnation, weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth. The thought itself is absurd. It's an obscenity to even say that or think that. And so I've shifted out of that, and I've spent now the last 10 or 12 years reconnecting with my inner self and soul, with the part of me that knows that doctrine or that ideology is not workable. If you believe in a God of love, the doctrine of hell is an insult to the moral character of a God of infinite love. Wouldn't you say that? So I'm dealing with this whole mentality of shifting away from the whole idea of an angry God that needs to be appeased, and I watched my church disperse, and I had about anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 who would come through there on any given week, and a little more than that considered themselves members of the church, and I've preached to all these thousands of people. But I've noticed over the last several years, even though I've been more pronounced as a quote-unquote heretic in the wider, supposedly religious circles of fundamentalism, because media picked up the story, and Christian radio and television and preachers from their pulpits who's never met me and whom I will never meet have denounced me and my teachings, and they've never read my book, Gospel of Inclusion, or God is Not a Christian. They heard little tidbits here and there, and they've come to their premature conclusions. Many are shifting, but a lot of them are still there. Now, why? Why is the church emptying, though, all across the board? Why do between 4,000 and 7,000 close literally in this country every year? Why do 1,500 ministers leave the ministry? They just quit. Why are many complaining? Are they becoming alcoholics and drug users and abusers? Because they're preaching something every Sunday to preserve their pension and their parsonage, but they don't believe it. And they're becoming alcoholics and drug addicts and very angry. Some preachers think they're anointed and they're just annoyed in the pulpit, and it's not really working. So the churches are emptying out. Why are the millennials aged between 19 and 29 or 39? They're totally uninterested in the traditions of their elders or of their fathers. They live in a pluralistic culture of diversity and openness and freedom, and they just can't, they don't have the ability to connect with the ideologies of bondage that for centuries the bulk of the populace in this world, in this country, have embraced without protestation. So why? The church is becoming increasingly irrelevant. A lot of it's because we've been too busy playing house, trying to keep our doors open, fussing over the bylaws and deciding who gets in. And we have failed to evolve with the rest of the species. The church is stuck. They've left. They've lost their relevance, and they have been too busy arguing about who's sleeping with whom, or who's not baptizing on a certain way or by certain names or models, or comparing and competing with church sizes and membership sizes, how many came to Sunday school and how big the offering was and how beautiful. You can drive down any given street, particularly here in Tulsa, and you can find several Christian churches, beautiful built churches, on the same 2 or 3 blocks right across the street from us, all believe Jesus and the Bible and heaven and hell, the basic rudimentary teachings of Christianity, and yet they can't worship together on some small item of disunity or disagreement. So the church has lost its significance in many, many ways. I spent 50 years of my life helping to repair, as I said earlier, the old wineskins, and now I'm at the place where I believe that we need to replace them. New wine is here, and as expanded consciousness in the old wineskins, they can't hold it, they won't hold it, and so they're bursting. People are literally leaving not only the church, they're leaving religion as they've known it. I used to stand in my pulpit and denounce Eastern cults and Eastern mysticism coming in, and people are mixing Zen Buddhism with the Holy Ghost, and that's just never going to work. And how can two walk together unless they be in agreement? And these things are not in agreement. Whilst agreement have truth with a lie and deception. And I quoted a lot of scriptures to support my bigotry and my arrogance and maybe my ignorance. But the old wineskins are not designed to hold the new wine. So I'm not complaining that the church is changing. I want it to change. I love the direction the culture is going in. I love the freer spirit. I remember back when I was in high school, and Free Love and the Flower Children were dancing. The girls stopped wearing underclothes, breasts and girdles, and sat out on the I was the student body president of San Diego High School, right downtown, of that 2 million, at that time, the 2 million people living in the city. My school was about 50% non-black or white, and it was about 20% black, 20% brown, Hispanic. We call them Chicanos, and maybe 10% otherwise. But I had been elected to the office of student body, called Associated Student Body President. So it was an inclusive student body. And this was back when I was 18 years old, 43 years ago. And I was already into various aspects of inclusion. I ran my election on unity and coming together. I was the first one to have an inter-club council where all the different clubs, from the thespians to the football team to the cheerleaders to the arts club, the acting club, the music, I had representatives from all those clubs, and I met with them once a month. And whenever we launched anything, all the school was involved. And I had Hispanics and Asians, and I had some atheists and non-believers, if you will. I had guys that were sleeping with their girlfriends and sitting in the meeting with joints in their pocket and contraceptives in the other one, or condoms. I knew all that was happening. I had several gay people around the council and in the school, and I was not judging. And I was 18 years old, and I've been brought up in a very judgmental denomination. But that was back then the universe preparing me for the gospel of inclusion that I preach today, and extended my hands to radical inclusion and unconditional love. And I saw the Baha'i students, the Baha'i faith people dancing around. You would see that often in San Diego, with the little tambourines and their hair cut and long and the robes. And, they would pass out tracts, and I wouldn't read them initially or let anybody see me reading them publicly, but I would take the tract just to be courteous. And I read a lot of that stuff, and it made sense. The Baha'i faith. When I was in Jerusalem, I went to I saw their world headquarters that were in Haifa, just north of Jerusalem in Israel. And I was fascinated with their pageantry, but I was also fascinated with their belief system, because it was more inclusive. It sounded to me more like Jesus. So I've come to the conclusion that the new wine is here, and as expanded consciousness and the old wineskins can't and won't work together, we must find another way to make it happen. And we're going to do that. I don't know that we can bring back the post-Exodus masses. These people that have left the church by the thousands, I don't think we're supposed to. But I think we can do an autopsy. And an autopsy is a post-mortem examination to discover the cause of death or the extent of a disease. Because the church is dying, and I know everybody doesn't believe that, but I've been in it all my life, and I know when the thing that I poured the first half of my soul into is dying. I see it. Not just in numbers. I don't even feel that electrifying presence and energy or charisma or anointing that I used to feel in going into those churches. I see us going through the same motions as we're pretty wild Pentecostals. I mean, we have some of the best singers, the best musicians, the best preachers, the most dramatic illustrations. The services are high vibration, high energy. There's dancing and a beautiful freedom that I thought you wouldn't find in like an Episcopal church or a church with a lot of liturgy and a white church, so to speak. Then I watched the church that I loved so much and poured so much energy in. I'm watching it zombied. It's like clones and clowns sitting there doing the same thing, going through the motions like robots. And not only, I'm not the only person that sees it, the laity see it, and a lot of the leadership sees it. But they don't know what to do. They're afraid to think or even listen to some of the things I'm saying. So an autopsy is a postmortem. Let's examine. Autopsy in the sense, in any sense, comes from the idea of a personal observation, autism. It's a self-centered thing. You look at yourself, look at your soul. You become an eyewitness to your reality. That's what autopsy means, both in Greek and from its Latin autopsia. It has to do with self-examination. You being an eye yourself. You look at yourself. The church needs to look at itself. When something dies in or about us, we should do some deep self-examination, whether that's a marriage or a ministry. What was the cause of the death? And then what was the cause of the root or the root of the disease that caused the death? If they give you a cause of death and say cancer or heart trouble or sugar diabetes, then what caused the cancer or the heart trouble or the sugar diabetes, the high blood pressure? What are the causes of the cause? Where there's fruit, there's root. So when you look at the fruit, you should examine the root, especially if the fruit is dying or if there's too much of it. Things happen. You've heard of an autoimmune disease, and it's a disease that's related to antibodies or what they call lymphocytes that produce against the substances that are already in your body, the antibodies and the things. Lymph is a fluid exuding from a sore or an inflamed tissue. The lymph nodes or the lymph glands and how it spills into the blood system and can cause one of the things that I dealt with when I was 12 years ago when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The one concern was, did the prostate get outside the organ because it could go into the bones or into the lymph glands. And then when it goes into the lymph glands, quickly it spreads through the body, through the bloodstream. And so there's some inflamed tissue and issues within religion. A lymph is like a colorless fluid that contaminates the white blood cells. It's really water. It's blood. It's infected blood. It rubs against drains through the lymphatic system into the bloodstream, and it causes sometimes a very quick death. I'm talking about autopsies. Why is there a change? Why is there a death in your ambition or death in your enthusiasm? Theos, godness. Enthusiasm comes from the idea of God's energy being in you. Have you felt like something died inside of you? Paul said, I die daily. Tissues metaphysically represent the textures or intricacies or the woven tapestries of your being, of your essence. How healthy are the tissues or the linen or lining of your soul? This is some deep-seated studies. What's happening inside of you? What are you causing to happen? What are you allowing to happen? What are you inviting, invoking, or inventing in your life that causes death or produces lethargy? A sick church produces a sick society or a sick culture. Healing society has very little to do with bringing people back into empty churches. We got to get them back into the church. We need prayer in the schools. We need, more people to pay their tithe. And I mean, that has nothing to do because we were doing that for years. And look what the culture has produced. Think of the years when everybody was in church. How did it get to this? Church scandals are nothing new. People have, and I'm not justifying it when I say dentists do get cavities, but would you go to a dentist who wears dentures? Would you have an aversion to that? Would you go to get your hair done or have hair treatment by somebody who's bald? Would you buy jewelry from a person who doesn't wear it? Would you buy a car from somebody who doesn't know how to drive? Mechanics cars break down. I'm not saying yay or nay. I'm just saying think about what you do, why you do it, what motivates you to do it or not do it. What does that motivation stem from? We can't and shouldn't expect business as usual. That attitude is not going to work. It's not going to bring sheep into the fold or back into the mold of the religion. We need a new model. And I'm not going to tell you what that is. You can assess that yourself. I have my idea of what it could be. And I love diversity. I love inclusion. I love non-judgmentalism, even from the way I look at myself. We can and we should listen to the reasons the people left. Not try to get them back, but say, what happened? Let's do why don't you come anymore? Why aren't you interested? Let kids tell us on the street why they don't believe in God. Don't run from the atheist. Don't run from the agnostic who says, I don't know, I'm not sure. And you say, well, you just need to have faith in God. That's an overly simplistic approach to a world that's getting farther and farther away from traditional religion. I'm not alarmed by it, but I care. I care that people access their divinity and enjoy it. And I think religion has obstructed the view and obscured the process, religion as we've known it. It's changing before our very eyes. And that's not just in Christianity. I've spoken to scores of people of the Islamic faith who don't like its traditions, who don't like its fundamentalisms, who don't even believe in Allah, which is the Arabic title for God, the way they've been presented, that Allah. Allah Akbar, God is great. Or jihad, holy war. We've been having that in religion since religion has existed. And there's a generation coming up that doesn't get that. They're not interested in it. They have no respect for it. So we have to listen to the reasons of why the people left. Listen to the rationale for leaving, and we should hear their reasons, not so much as criticisms, but valid observations of how they've experienced religion and why they are looking for other ways to express their faith or their spirituality. We can acknowledge that we have used our resources, our time, our powerful voices of communication for many of the wrong things as the church. We've cast out and excluded where we should have included, invited, and drawn people in. Not only welcomed them, but wanted them. You know, a lot of churches have all are welcome, but if you read the fine print, it'll read all are not wanted. We say all are welcomed here to become like us, believe like us, embrace everything we embrace. But if you don't, you're not wanted. We've judged more than we've connected with people. And that's one of the reasons many have gone. We've fretted over our own infrastructure and who the hell is sleeping with whom and divorcing whom. And while our neighbors were hungry and hurting and isolated and alienated from the larger expression, we're playing these little petty games in the church. And people are wondering what's happening and why the church has not functioned in the 21st century in a remarkable way that it may have in the 20th century based on particular assessments. I think we should open to change and to shifting. And if that means dressing more casually, playing a little jazz and worship, diversifying the music, laying some of the hymnals aside, and writing new music, singing new music, hearing new music, a different approach to teaching or preaching, a different approach to the assembly. Jesus said, upon this rock I'll build my church. He didn't use the word kuriakos in Greek, which means assembly or congregation. He used the word ekklesia, ek meaning out of, klesis meaning to call or to summons. Those called out of obscurity or darkness into the marvelous illumination, the marvelous enlightenment, God's marvelous light. There is a light that's brighter than your religion. There's a light that's brighter than your particular system of faith. There's a light that's brighter than your Bible or your interpretation of the Bible. If you don't go within, you're going to have to go without. Look inside yourself. Divinity is speaking. Your divinity, your divine self. Divine mind is expressing itself and experiencing itself in and as you. Enjoy that. Love it. Embrace yourself and embrace your soul. Carlton Pearson, thanks for your consciousness. Thanks for listening. God bless you. God be you.